Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the module 3. In this chapter, we are going to focus on some of the most commonly used HTML elements that act as containers. Containers don't just hold content, they also help us structure the page logically, making it easier to organize texts, images, links, and even other elements. We will look at tags like div tag and span tag and see how they work differently. While div tag is often used to group larger blocks of content, span tag is used for smaller inline sections. By the end of this chapter, you will hopefully understand how to use these containers to build layouts, apply styling, and make your web pages more structured and readable. Now, let's break down some key terms about containers in HTML. First, a container is simply any element that has an opening and a closing tag. Think of it like a box that can hold content or even other elements. Next, a parent container. It is the box that holds other elements inside it. For example, if a div tag has a paragraph tag inside, the div tag is the parent and the paragraph tag is the child. Then when then we have two important types of elements. A block element, it's sometimes called a block level element, automatically stretches to fill the full width of its parent's container. It can hold other block elements, inline elements, or text. For example, it includes the div tag, the paragraph tag, and the section tag. An inline element only takes up as much space as it needs. It stays in line with surrounding text and can contain text or other inline elements. Examples include the span tag or the anchor tag. Understanding the difference between block and inline element is really important because it affects how contents flow and how layouts are built. In this slide, you can see some of the most common container we use in HTML. Each one has its own purpose, and together they help us structure a web page in a meaningful way. For example, the header tag is used at the top of a page or section to hold introductory content like a title, logo, or maybe even navigation. At the opposite end, the footer tag appears at the bottom of the page and usually contains detail like the author's name, copyright information, or the last date the page was updated, etc. If we need to add content details, we use the address tag element, which is specifically designed for that purpose. The main tag element is really important because it holds the primary content of the page, the stuff that defines what the page is actually about. And then we can break that content into smaller parts using section, which group related content together, or article tag, which is great for things that stand alone. For example, like a blog post or a news story. For navigation, we use the nav element. That's where all the menus and navigation links live. If we want to show related but less important contents like a sidebar or extra notes, we can place that inside and a side tag. And finally, we have two very flexible containers like div and span. The div is a block level container that often used to group large chunks of content. On the other hand, span is an inline container perfect for styling or grouping smaller pieces of text within a sentence. So, while some of these containers are very semantic and descriptive, others like div and span are more generic, giving us flexibility to structure and style our pages however we want. Let's look and at an example of containers here inside the body tag. We start a paragraph element. that contains the sentence, the top selling board games of all time are. Um, these shows us that even a simple piece of text can be inside its own container. Right after that, we have an ordered list element, which stands for OL tag. This is the parent coordinate container that holds all of the list items. Inside the OL tag, we can see multiple list elements. Each one is a container for single list item. So chess is one list item, checkers is another, and so on. When the browser renders this, we see the text from the paragraph at the top, followed by a numbered list of games. Each number comes automatically from the ordered list element, and each list represents one entry. So, in this example, we can clearly see how different containers like paragraph or the ordered list or the list and the list elements work together to organize both text and lists in a structured way. Now let's take a look at block elements with visible containers. In this example, this page is divided into logical components using div elements. You can see we have one div element for the logo and headline, and another for navigation, one for the main content, and another for the footer and other legal information. All of these developments sit inside the body, which makes the body their parent container. Each div is dependent, and together they help organize the page into different sections. On the right hand side, you can see how the browser displays these containers when we add borders. It becomes really clear how each div forms a separate block. This is why div is so commonly used. It's a sorry, it's a flexible block level. Sorry, it's a flexible block level container that lets us build the structure of a web page step by step. Now that we have seen block level containers, let's talk about inline elements. An inline element is different from a block element because it only takes up the minimum amount of space it needs inside its parent container. It does not break onto a new line, it just flows alongside the surrounding text. A good example of this is the anchor element. When you create a hyperlink, the clickable area is only as large as the text inside it, not the entire width of the page. Another important inline element is span. This is a generic inline container, meaning it doesn't have any built-in meaning like anchor or the M tag do. Instead, it's often used when we want to apply a style or an interaction to just a small part of text. For instance, if you want to color any one word in a sentence, you might wrap it in a span. And finally, it's worth mentioning that both div and span are really flexible tags, but they are meant mostly for presentation and styling. A good practice is to use more descriptive semantic elements like address or article when possible. Um, Save the div and span element for cases where no other elements make sense. Here's an example of how the span element work when we apply it inside a paragraph. In this case, the entire paragraph is wrapped in a paragraph tag, which acts as the parent container. Inside that paragraph, each sentence has been wrapped in its own element. By doing this, we can treat every sentence as a separate component, and on the right you can see the effect. Each sentence is highlighted with a different color, showing that span tags break the paragraph into smaller styled parts. This is the real power of span element. It doesn't change the structure of the page, but it allows us to target small chunks of text for formatting or styling. So whenever you want to style or apply effects to a part of a sentence without breaking it or separate paragraphs, span is the perfect choice. Now let's see the difference between block elements and inline elements using Chrome Dev tool. On the left side, we are hovering over a paragraph element. You can see a rectangle appear around the entire paragraph and it stretches across the full width of the page. That's because paragraph is a block element and block elements always take up the full width of their parent container. Now let's look at the right side where we are hovering over a span element. This time the rectangle only wraps tightly around the word White House. That's because span is an inline element. And inline elements only take up as much space as their contents need. So DevTools makes it really easy to visualize the differences. Block elements have like white boxes. Um, while inline elements behave like small containers that sit inside the line of text. So that's it for chapter 1, and I'll see you in chapter 2, chapter 3.2.